Welcome to the Doherty Water for Food podcast. Since 2010, the Doherty Water for Food Global Institute at the University of Nebraska has worked toward one goal, a food and water secure world. One in which global food security is ensured without compromising the use of water to meet other essential human and environmental needs. It's a daunting vision, but one that is vitally important. This podcast amplifies the voices of those making waves in this space. We hope you enjoy today's episode.
Hi, I'm Frances Hayes, Director of Communications and Public Relations, and your host for this episode of the Water for Food podcast. I'm joined today by Ron Yoder, a pillar of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln community, and most recently serving as the Senior Associate Vice Chancellor for UNL's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Ron will be retiring from his storied career this month, and I'm excited to chat with him today about both the past and the future. Ron joined UNL in 2004 as the department head for the Department of Biological Systems Engineering before becoming the Associate Vice Chancellor for IANR in 2011. He also served as interim NU Vice President and IANR Vice Chancellor in 2016, after then IANR Vice Chancellor Ronnie Green was named the UNL Chancellor. First of all, Ron, congratulations on your retirement, and thank you so much for sitting down with me today. To start us off, tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to Nebraska nearly 2 decades ago.
Thank you, Frances. Great pleasure to be with you today. Probably goes back to my very first professional job when I lived on the border, but in Wyoming, in the North Platte Valley, and I saw the great agriculture in Nebraska and the great water resources in Nebraska. It took me quite a while. That was several decades before I actually came to Nebraska. So as a civil engineer in my undergraduate training, I was a water resources engineer. And then I saw the light and became an agricultural engineer, working in irrigation and agricultural water management. What brought me to Nebraska was that initial contact with Nebraska when I lived in eastern Wyoming, and then also several good friends here at the university who encouraged me to apply for the position in biological systems engineering.
Well, I'm glad the word gets out. You played an especially important role in the formation of the Doherty Water for Food Global Institute around the 2009-2010 timeframe. Tell us how those initial discussions came to be and why you and others felt such an institute was needed.
There really were 2 parallel conversations going on at the time. And to your question, one of the reasons I came back to Nebraska, and I say back because my daughter was born in Scottsbluff, even though we lived across the border in Wyoming, was because of the importance of water to Nebraska. The 2 parallel conversations that I'm referring to, one was J.B. Milliken as president of the university and Moens Bai as CEO of Valmont, often conversed when they were at events in Omaha. So that was one conversation that was ongoing. The other conversation then, when there was known to be some interest from the Doherty Foundation through Moens Bai and the Valmont Corporation to have an institute that addressed water and its wise use in agriculture. The other conversation then, when we had that indication of an interest, took place here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and that was largely led by Prem Paul, who at the time was the Vice Chancellor of Office of Research and Economic Development. And Prem pulled together a group of people to talk about what an institute might look like, what this entity, it wasn't even called an institute at that point, what this entity might look like. And it was a group of about 6 or 7 people, including Prem. And specifically, there were 3 of us that were largely interested in the institute being focused on agriculture and focused on water management, which we understood to be what the Doherty Foundation wanted. And those 3 were Bob Meany, who was senior vice president of Valmont at the time, and Shashi Verma, who was a senior faculty member in the School of Natural Resources. So the three of us would often, after meetings of the committee, would meet in the parking lot and talk about what we thought we just heard and talk about what we thought ought to be. So that gives you a quick introduction to the conversations that were ongoing. And those went on for several years until we ultimately were able to come to a point where the Doherty Foundation was willing to make the funds available, and then the university worked on the hiring of the individuals that would be the Doherty Water for Food Institute, the Doherty Water for Food Global Institute.
As someone who's only been with the Institute for 5 years now, it's fascinating to me to hear how these things come together of something that, has just existed for as long as I can remember. So that's really fascinating. It's been over 10 years since the Institute, DWFI, was created with a vision of a water and food secure world. Now, as you're retiring and having this retrospective, what do you hope DWFI will accomplish over the next 10 years?
My hope is that the original vision for the Institute will be realized, and that is the wise use of water worldwide to produce adequate food for people across the globe. Not that we haven't gotten to that point, because we have, but we spent much of the first 10 years building the Institute and making the connections and the partnerships across the world. And I think that has been done extraordinarily well, and why we have a strong institute now. And as you know, Francis, there is the annual conference. And we said early on we would feel like we were, I hesitate to say that we had arrived, but that we were getting to the point that we wanted to get to when our partners worldwide would tell us they were putting the date for our next water conference on their calendars. And we've been told that. So I think we have, if you'll pardon my saying so, I think we've arrived, at least in that way. But the next 10 years, then, I think, will be focused on, okay, let's now go ahead and solidify those partnerships, continuing to look for new partners and new opportunities, and to take what we know. We have considerable bench depth with our faculty working in various areas of water. You name it, the subsurface water, groundwater, the plant water uptake, evapotranspiration, and the environmental impacts of withdrawing water and using water to raise food. So we have a considerable bench depth, and we have a lot of strength of people working in these various areas. So over the next 10 years, I would hope that we would expand our global reach, and that would be done by the people that we have on our team broadening their contacts with people across the world, and thereby increasing the production of food in some food scarce areas, and always with the focus on two things. One is using the water that's available wisely, and the other is in making sure that we do that in an environmentally sustainable way.
To expand on that question, what challenges might we need to address that didn't exist when the Institute was originally formed, or weren't really on the radar yet? What do you see as the big upcoming challenges over the next decade?
I think challenges that will always confront agriculture are the competition for the water. That's always an issue, and particularly in some parts of the world where the populations are expanding rapidly. So we've talked about this, and if you go to various other water conferences worldwide, there's frequently a session or two about this, and that's how can we use the same water twice or thrice. How can we use wastewater? How can we recycle water? Because after all, a water molecule is a water molecule. And so if you can reuse it, if you can conserve it, you can have it available for the beneficial use that produces food, which is what the Global Water for Food Institute is about. So certainly that is one challenge. Another challenge is, as always, the areas of the world that get excessive water and get no water. Those regions frequently have shifted over the centuries, and that continues to happen. And when that happens, when you have populations that cannot move easily, that creates a real challenge. So these two things, and then along with the environmental sustainability that I mentioned, that's always been there, so that's not a new one. And yet there are ways that the use of water become non-sustainable in an environmental sense, and so we always need to keep a close focus on making sure that we're doing it in a way that is positive for the society in which we're producing the food.
In all of your years in academics, agriculture, and university administration, what are some of the biggest lessons and takeaways you can share with us today? You've experienced a lot throughout your career. What are some of those big things?
I'm not very typical in my approach to higher ed leadership, and perhaps it's because of my engineering background. I tend to look at building the foundation to ensure that we're able to be sustainable in what we're doing. And I think that the long view is important. So to get where you want to go, and I think the Doherty Water for Food Global Institute is a good example, you build the foundation and then you begin to do the things that you formed the entity to do. And the thing that I have seen most is a tendency to do something, form something, and then because of the leadership that changes that often occur in higher ed, that you don't have the sustained effort and you don't have the impact that you had hoped you would have. So I would say that my one point that I want to make here is that being able to have an entity, in this case the Institute, that can function over the long term to have the impact that was envisioned when the Institute was initially formed.
What are some of the things that you're most proud of that you've done here at the University of Nebraska? Can you pick out 2 or 3 and share them with us?
Well, maybe in a generic sense, I hope and I think, as I'm retiring, many of my colleagues have told me that this was the case. I tend to put my focus on working across disciplines, working across the university, having a broad coalition of individuals to work together, and I think that has actually happened with the Water for Food Institute. I think it's happened in many other endeavors that I've been involved with. I think that it's more effective if you have more people engaged, and I also think it's much more sustainable. So I would say I hesitate always to use the word what am I proud of, but I think having built relationships across the university that have often paid significant dividends in the things that we've been able to do together as teams. Certainly my involvement with the Doherty Water for Food Global Institute has been very gratifying for me to see where it is at this point, because it was a bit of an idea. I wouldn't say that I came to the university with that idea, but going back to my days in Wyoming and understanding the long history that Nebraska had with managing its water well, with the formation of the natural resource districts back in the 70s, with the tremendous water resource that is the Ogallala Aquifer, with the tremendous surface water resources we have with the Platte and the Loop and the Republican River and the Elkhorn River systems. All of these were things that I thought should make Nebraska the center of water management in North America, certainly, if not the world. So it's been very gratifying to be involved with forming this institute. As an engineer, the facilities that we've been able to renovate, improve, expand, that's almost like a hobby with me. It's like I get paid to do this because it's just something I really enjoy. And then finally, team building across the academic enterprise when I was head of the Biological Systems Engineering Department. We were able to increase our enrollment significantly and to graduate some really, really excellent students from that program, and I've always been very pleased with that.
You seem like a very humble person, Ron, and so I apologize for putting you on the spot with that question, but I think those and more you should be very proud of. And I think what you said about teams really resonates with me, that if you take the time to form the right team and put in that effort, it pays back in dividends in the form of a lasting impact rather than a one quick hit. So thank you for all that you have done for the university and the institute. Now I'm excited to hear what's next for you.
We are relocating, and only because for family reasons. People have asked me over the years whether I'm a native Nebraskan, and I'm not, but there wasn't much I could do about that. But I have said that I'm a Nebraskan by choice, and my heart will always be in Nebraska. It's been an extraordinarily good fit for me personally, but because of some family responsibilities, we need to be closer to a very elderly father-in-law, and so we will be relocating to East Tennessee, which is a place that we have lived at previously. And so in addition to a house in town, we have a piece of land in the country which I hope to do some improvements on. It's a piece of pasture land, and who knows, I might even buy a few cows.
And we hope you'll come back and visit sometime.
Oh, absolutely.
So, well, do you have anything else that you would like to comment on before we wrap this up?
Oh, well, thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss this, Francis. I do, as I said earlier, feel very good about the current status of the Water for Food Institute. I feel very good about the future, where it's headed. The leadership of the Institute has been very strong throughout the history that it's existed, and I'm confident that it will continue to be strong. The outreach has been great, both here within Nebraska and within North America and across the world. And as I said earlier, that's been very gratifying, and I look forward to seeing where the Doherty Institute goes. I will be watching.
Good. Well, I want to thank you again for this fun retrospective on your career and a bonus retrospective on the formation of the Institute. Your leadership at the university will be very missed, especially by those here at the Institute that have all sorts of stories about working with you over the years. I know you've positively affected a lot of people in this community, both at the Institute and the university, and we're very appreciative of the legacy that you have left, and we wish you all the best in your next adventure.
Thank you, Francis. You're very kind.
Thanks for joining us this time on the Doherty Water for Food podcast. Make sure to visit our website, waterforfood.nebraska.edu, to view show notes or subscribe so you don't miss future episodes.